The Trump administration says the complete Epstein files are finally here.
The most transparent president in the nation's history.
The US Department of Justice has dropped 3 million pages, over 180,000 images, and hundreds of hours of footage. But we don't think that's all the files the DOJ is holding. In fact, we know for sure it's not. We can show you that only a tiny fraction of data has been released to the public, which means we still don't have all the information about Jeffrey Epstein, the full details of his sex trafficking ring and who knew what and when. And that matters because this is a story about a predator, a paedophile, and his victims who've been failed for decades.
What a massive cover-up this has been and continues to be.
Many believe that Epstein's global club is still being protected from true accountability. But these releases could be changing that. The brother of the king has been arrested. That is a seismic moment in this story.
You have to wonder what's in the files we haven't seen.
So let's talk about the missing terabytes of files we know the US government is still keeping from the public, and why we think this is still just the beginning of the Epstein scandal. So how did we get here? Last July, the DOJ and the FBI released this memo saying that they had conducted an exhaustive review of all the files relating to Jeffrey Epstein and that they had more than 300 gigabytes of data. And at the time they said that they'd released all the files they were going to and that no one else was under investigation. But we revealed in a foresight the next month that we thought the DOJ and the FBI had terabytes more data than they were admitting to. Since then, Congress has forced the Trump administration to release the data they have on Epstein. And the DOJ says they've done just that, publishing files in December and at the very end of January. A data drop totaling around 300 gigabytes.
This review is over.
But that very release proves that we were right all along, because buried in the data was evidence that the DOJ and the FBI know they have terabytes of evidence on file. Look at these emails from June 2020. I'm just going to zoom in here. Now, investigators with the FBI and the New York District Attorney's Office, they're talking about storage devices being seized with a capacity of somewhere around 40 up to 50 terabytes, and that they expect the data on those devices to be in total somewhere between 20 and 40 terabytes. But now let's go forward 5 years and we're in March 2025. Another set of emails discussing the data. This time it's been shared between the Washington and New York FBI field offices. And now they're saying we are looking at a total of approximately 14.6 terabytes of archived data to unpack. So here it is in black and white. Officials from the DOJ and the FBI saying that they're dealing with approximately 15 terabytes of data, potentially meaning that 98% of the Epstein files they had access to are still unreleased. Those terabytes of data are the culmination of an extraordinary amount of investigation, including a 2005 police raid on Epstein's house in Florida that led to his 2008 conviction, the search of his New York City house, one of the largest private residencies in Manhattan after his 2019 arrest, and the 2020 search of his infamous private island of Little St. James following Epstein's death in prison the year before. The evidence the FBI and Palm Beach police gathered revealed a man obsessed with surveillance and data, computers, hard drives, servers, all seized, all offering potential insight into his world of criminality and abuse. And it left law enforcement with a huge amount of data to organise. The Attorney General Pam Bondi has said that more than 500 attorneys and reviewers went through the documents ahead of the release deadline set by Congress last year, and that the files were full of duplicates and repeats.
We've released more than 3 million pages, including 180,000 images.
Bondi and the Trump administration have framed this process as a success, proof that they're delivering on their campaign promises.
We're doing everything we can based on the tight time frame and over 3 million pages that we released that Donald Trump signed for pure transparency.
But what new emails in the latest release actually reveal, aside from the terabytes of unaccounted evidence, it's just how messy this whole process has been. Investigators and prosecutors admitting themselves that, at the beginning at least, the process of organising all this data was a nightmare. Just look at these messages from early 2020 where officials are talking about just like how much data there is here. Look at this stuff in red. Many of the files are too large to open in the viewer. Then they say files that are completely invisible to us. Let's just scroll down again. Look at this stuff in blue. We're sifting through more than 1 million documents without much rhyme or reason. And then there's this one email I've got to show you, which probably gives the most descriptive account of just how crazy this whole process is. Imagine if we had seized papers from approximately 100,000 filing cabinets in a dozen different office buildings. And then instead of keeping them organised or labelled by room or even by office building, all 1.3 million documents so far just got dumped into one big pile. Now, those emails are from nearly 6 years ago, some written in the early days of a global pandemic. And the files they were collecting were being used to prosecute Ghislaine Maxwell, which they did. But they provide a snapshot of just how difficult the process was. And 5 years later, things don't appear to have improved a huge amount. Now, the Deputy Attorney General's office, they're asking for an update, and they're asking for what's contained in the approximately 5.7 terabytes of data in the hard drives. But then look at the reply they get from the FBI, because they appear quite perplexed with all of this. They say, nobody knows what you're referring to in regards to the 5.7 terabytes of data in the hard drives, because we're currently reviewing more than 8 terabytes of video footage. And maybe the best example of just how messy organising this evidence has been is actually how the DOJ has released millions of files to the public. So to help explain all of that, I'm going to talk to my colleague, Brian O'Flynn, who's part of our data and investigations team. You've been digging through all of the Epstein files since they were released. I mean, what's it been like dealing with all of that data?
It's been a nightmare. It's kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack sometimes.
Can you just show me what you mean by that? Can you show me the website?
Yeah, let me just share my screen with you.
So what happens if you type in, I don't know, Donald Trump?
So I guess this is just a good way of showing you how sort of contextless the files are. It's sort of like almost unstructured data, which is dumped as just a series of millions of PDF files. So the database doesn't know whether it's delivering you an email, whether it's delivering you an FBI file, something from a deposition.
Where are the videos? How do you get the videos?
Most of the video files and also other file types like audio, even spreadsheets, they're all hidden effectively behind PDF files. We realized that what you get when you try to access one of these files is just a no images produced PDF, so it's effectively a blank PDF. So then we had to come up with a plan to basically systematically check each file and get the videos that were sort of effectively concealed behind these files.
The solution was to write code that would do the heavy lifting for them. That script accessed the DOJ datasets and automatically checked each PDF file against a list of common file extensions for video, audio, documents, and other apps. If the script detected a hit for a certain extension, it downloaded the PDF and renamed it to the correct file type. But even then, each file still took minutes of processing, and there are millions of files in the new datasets to go through. So the team had multiple machines running the script day and night, feeding all the hits into a shared folder. After days of this process, the team found nearly 2,500 video and audio files. Among them, random videos like David Blaine doing a magic trick for Bill Gates, but also hundreds of heavily redacted footage that gave a glimpse into Epstein's world. And then this, spycam footage from Epstein's office in his Palm Beach home that seems to show him with Ghislaine Maxwell and numerous women or girls. So Brian, we'll come back to that spycam footage in a minute, but can we just go back to what it's been like for you trying to sift through all this data and try to investigate it?
Yeah, it's been quite frustrating. I mean, you can't just say, hello, please give me all of Epstein's emails from this person to this person from this date to this date.
Given the struggle to try and get through this data, what do you think it tells you about how the DOJ and the FBI have handled all this information?
I think it's difficult to say for sure whether it's been incompetence in the way it was released or if it was, deliberate obstruction. If the goal of this release was to make the information transparent and to allow people to investigate it, then it's very problematic the way that it was done.
And despite that struggle, you did manage to get this spycam footage from his Palm Beach property. What do you think that tells us about Jeffrey Epstein, but also the files about Jeffrey Epstein?
We knew there was all this surveillance architecture that exists in Epstein's homes, and so obviously footage from those cameras exists somewhere.
It does seem incredible that in the 2,500 video and audio files, there's just a single camera representing Epstein's surveillance operation. Now, we know from police reports that Epstein had CCTV installed in his Palm Beach property, but that before agents went in 2005, the computer equipment associated with those cameras had been removed. But he'd also wired his New York townhouse. The property was searched, and these images show multiple cameras in the property. A room with monitors and servers that were linked to the cameras was also photographed. And that room was behind a door that read 24-hour video surveillance.
He showed me where the men monitoring everything were. And I looked on the cameras and I saw toilet, bed, toilet, bed. It was very obvious that they were like monitoring private moments.
We've not seen any surveillance camera footage from Epstein's New York property in the released files. And coming back to the data point, all the video and audio files that we do have, they add up to about 60 gigabytes in total. That represents less than 0.5% of the nearly 15 terabytes the FBI and DOJ say they were dealing with. Now, the Deputy Attorney General did offer some explanation.
I want to address what we didn't produce. Files that contain personally identifiable information of victims or victims' personal and medical files. Any depiction of CSAM or child pornography was obviously excluded. Anything that would jeopardize an active federal investigation. And finally, anything that depicts or contain images of death, physical abuse, or injury, also not produced.
Aside from how troubling that last line from Todd Blanche sounds, even with the files we have seen, the haphazard way they were finally released raises its own questions. Like, is it unreasonable to expect the richest and most powerful government in the world to be able to handle information at this volume and to release it properly to the public? And critics and politicians in the US are asking a lot of questions right now. Is this DOJ incompetence? Is it a genuine problem organising so many files and information? Or is it something worse than that? Is Democrat Pramila Jayapal right?
What a massive cover-up this has been and continues to be.
In the congressional hearing with Pam Bondi, a Republican Congressman, Thomas Massie, pointed out to her that in the millions of documents released, despite it being a requirement of the law, there wasn't a single page of explanation from the FBI or the DOJ about why, to date, there has been exactly 0 prosecutions of anyone other than Ghislaine Maxwell.
Our Epstein Files Transparency Act requires you, please put it back on the screen, to release the internal decision about whether to prosecute him or not, and it's not in the files, and it's not in the files for any of these other men.
In that same hearing, Democrat Jamie Raskin pointed out that the DOJ is also legally obliged to protect the privacy of Epstein's victims in the files. But they failed to do that too.
You published their names, their phone numbers, their addresses, personally identifying information.
Whether or not that was incompetence or by design, it put vulnerable people in a dangerous situation.
The people who have harmed us, they are hidden, while survivors have been exposed. Abusers' names and contact information is redacted, while our faces and stories are left on full display. This is not protection. This is betrayal.
During that congressional hearing, Pam Bondi said she was deeply sorry for what the victims had been through.
To the survivors in the room, if you are willing, please stand.
But when she was asked to look at the victims in the eye and apologise for that failure to redact some of their names, she didn't turn to face them.
I'm not going to get in the gutter for her theatrics.
And while some of the victims' names weren't redacted, an alleged child sex trafficking co-conspirator was redacted. Billionaire Les Wexner, the owner of Victoria's Secret, was accused by the FBI of being a co-conspirator in the files. His name and picture were originally redacted until a Democrat named him and others on the floor of the House of Representatives. Now, Wexner told the House Oversight Committee that he was naive, foolish, and gullible for trusting Epstein, but maintains that he did nothing wrong and has nothing to hide.
I was conned by the world Olympic all-time con artist.
Now, Pam Bondi does admit there have been some issues.
Our error rate is very low, but
the victims are right behind you. We've got to convince them.
But she's also repeatedly tried to blame previous administrations for their failures and claims that the release of the files now shows that the Trump administration is the most transparent ever.
Donald Trump signed that law. He is the most transparent president in the nation's history.
Bondi's performance in the hearing, along with repeated claims by the Trump administration officials that this is the end of the Epstein story, has played into victims' fears that, regardless of who's in power, the perpetrators will be protected and they will be ignored. Just listen to this exchange when Bondi was asked about whether anyone else would be charged in relation to Epstein.
So I really have just one question for you. How many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you indicted? How many perpetrators are you even investigating?
First, you showed it. I find it.
How many have you indicted?
Excuse me. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No,
Your
you're going to answer the
theatrics are
question the
ridiculous.
way I asked.
I want to show you a handful of emails here, and I'm not going to read out the contents of the emails because they are graphic and they're troubling. But what I do want to show you is that in each example, the name of the person contacting Epstein is redacted. Why hasn't the DOJ or the FBI explained why these names are redacted or why emails like this aren't being investigated? Because look, in New Mexico, lawmakers are pushing for Epstein's Zorro Ranch to be investigated after files indicate that bodies are buried on the property. And experts backed by the UN have released a statement saying that the files show that crimes against humanity may have been committed. How does that fit with the failure of successive US governments of both parties to find justice? How does that fit with Bondi and this administration's conclusion that there's nothing left to investigate? It seems pretty clear to me that it doesn't. Now, we put all this to the Department of Justice and asked them about missing data and claims of a cover-up. They didn't give us a response. This isn't over. Maybe, now that the world knows about the missing terabytes, there will be pressure on the DOJ and the FBI to tell us what they are or even release them. But even if not, the global fallout from just a fraction of the files being released is impossible to ignore. We've already seen the toppling of Britain's former ambassador to the US, the fall of Barclays' chief executive, the resignation of Goldman Sachs' top US lawyer, and perhaps most astoundingly, a disgraced former prince has been placed under arrest, the brother of the king, an historic moment for the British monarchy. But some would say that is perhaps just a start and not full accountability for the former prince and others potentially implicated in this alleged criminal conspiracy. Because as we've seen, more elusive still are actual prosecutions for those who took part in or facilitated Epstein's litany of sex crimes, punishment for the systematic abuse of women and girls that these emails make evident. So what does this all mean for the justice for the victims, especially in light of the arrest of former Prince Andrew? Well, I'm going to talk about that right now with Tara Palmieri, a journalist who's been working on this story for a number of years. Hi, Tara.
Hey, how are you?
Firstly, Tara, when it comes to the release of these files, having, been on this story for a long time, having spoken to survivors, what's their reaction to what we've seen?
It's a mix. They are happy to see the files being released. They're happy to see the DOJ actually sort of executing on it, but they're also really distressed to see their own names and identities, many of them, Jane Doe's up until this point being revealed. I think they see this as very reckless and not done with any sort of precision. And there's still so many questions about whether the redactions are truly protecting victims or if they are protecting powerful people. But yeah, I think it was really disheartening at first when they saw the way the files were being released. But, the fallout around the world, not in the US, has given them hope that there may be some accountability here. There might be international pressure at the very least.
And so the arrest of the former Prince Andrew that we've seen, does that feel like that's perhaps the start of some sense of accountability, some sense of justice?
Yes, absolutely. This is a huge day. Someone who has denied for so long, even, meeting Virginia Roberts Giuffre for so long, she has told her story, been dragged through the mud, especially by the British press, been told that the picture they have of the two of them is fake. And she remembers things down to the details, like that he was sweating in the nightclub and he claims he doesn't sweat anymore. It's the most bizarre excuses I've ever heard.
There's this lack of joining up here, because last year the FBI said in a memo that when they looked at the evidence around Epstein, there was nothing that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. And yet here we have Andrew being arrested. So something doesn't match up when it comes to these files and what we're being told by the DOJ.
Right. And the UK wouldn't even know about these relationships between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson, the former UK ambassador to the US, or Prince Andrew, if not for the release of the files in the Epstein Files Transparency Act. So in a way, they fed each other. But you have to wonder what's in the 2.5 million files we haven't seen that have not been released because of either national security or allegedly to protect the victims. But clearly they haven't really cared that much about that already. Literally releasing one file that included just names of victims.
Is this about there being too much data to handle because it's just, so unwieldy? Is it incompetence or is it a cover-up?
It's a cover-up, an incompetent cover-up. And yeah, they spent their whole summers redacting the name of President Trump from FOIA requests rather than preparing to release files. And if they were actually following along what was happening politically in the country and the growing demand to see these files, they would have started on this a long time ago.
And Donald Trump is obviously, as you say, he's named thousands of times in these files. We've touched upon it here, this idea that we're seeing the fallout here in the UK, even in Europe. Where's the accountability or anything happening in America?
I mean, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, it's embarrassing for this country, supposedly, the shining light of democracy. And yet here we are not even able to trust our nation to provide security, because isn't that the Department of Justice's role in a country, is to provide security to crime victims and to actually adjudicate and prosecute when there are complaints? It just seems like, I mean, as you saw, I don't know if you watched the hearings in the United States, but when Pam Bondi was asked if she met with the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, they all raised their hands to say that they hadn't. She did not seem to care. She pivoted to the Dow and how we should all be happy that we're rich, not that crime victims are not being protected or listened to or even heard. It seems like this is all done for an audience of one, President Trump, who claims that he's been exonerated. That's what his answer, whenever he's asked about the Jeffrey Epstein files, the Epstein files prove I've been exonerated.
Is the pressure on him growing? Is it changing?
I think there's always been pressure on him. I think this will increase pressure, but he puts it in the Democratic hoax bucket, right?
And Pam Bondi's congressional hearing, I mean, she basically kept on claiming, whenever pushed on this, we are the most transparent ever. The only point I guess she had, which even Democrats agreed with, is that if we are talking about incompetence or a cover-up or whatever, this does go back several Department of Justices under multiple presidents.
Yeah, it goes all the way back to 1996 under President Clinton, when Maria Farmer called in a desperate message to the FBI saying that she and her sister had been assaulted, and they had no response. There was nothing. And yes, it continued. It's been administration after administration after administration that has not prosecuted this case. And I think the Epstein files reveal exactly why. The elite powers protected themselves the entire time.
Is that what's really important about the Epstein files more broadly, is that when we see who he was friends with and who is in that circle and the lack of accountability and what was really going on, it gets to the heart of, trust in our institutions, trust in the process working?
Yeah, and trust in the elites. Trust in the people that run these institutions, from academia to business, finance, research, science, our political leaders, the Department of Justice. I mean, if you look at the email exchanges that Jeffrey Epstein was having with these people, they weren't high-level, high-minded, let's try to make the world a better place type of emails. A lot of them were about sex, or coded emails about sex, or how to make money, or dodge paying taxes, or parties. It was not reputable communication at all.
And so just finally, I'm conscious that when we cover the Epstein files and we get mired in the data, the files, the horrible details, the conspiracies, the anger, the confusion, that we do often forget the victims at the heart of this. Is that a final concern here, that as we get further into these files and finding out the truth, that at some point we actually forget about the justice that the victims need and the answers they require?
I think that the more we see these emails, these details, these files, we start to believe the victims more and more. They've been dismissed. Their stories have been dismissed as hearsay and gossip for so many years. And I think the more that people can see the extent of this conspiracy, the more that they hear that the victims have been honest and been telling the truth about something that so many people have closed their eyes to. And I think that it only validates them. But I do think that unfortunately in this country, in this world, people, they don't trust the words of women sometimes, and they have to see other evidence. And so if that's what it takes, if that's what the Epstein Files Transparency Act reveals, then great.
Tara Palmieri, thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching Foresight. Thank you to Tara for speaking with me. And also a big thank you to our investigations team, which isn't just lovely Brian, who you saw in the video, but it's also Emily, Guy and Ed, who've all had no sleep and have worked so hard on these files and on this story. And on that, do watch our original Foresight, which we worked with them on last summer when we first looked at this missing data. And we said back then, and we said today, that this is just the beginning. There is more data out there. There are even more potential resignations, even arrests. And we want you to tell us, as always, what you want to hear next on this particular story, because we are not dropping it. We're going to carry on digging when it comes to the Epstein Files. What else do you want to know? Who else should we look at? Let us know in the comments. And make sure, as always, that you subscribe to Foresight.